Welcome to Dancin Songcast. I'm Scott Simpson, casting from Dancin Moon Studio in Spearfish Canyon on the north end of the Black Hills of South Dakota, right on the banks of the Spearfish Creek. If you'd like to follow along, you can download a free PDF from my lyric book from scottsimpsonmusic.com/lyrics, and of course you can find links to all my music there as well. So let's get casting and find out what song we're going to talk about this time. Well, welcome to another poetry episode of Dancin Moon Songcast. Normally we talk about songwriting and songs and music making and all of that. We're taking about 10 weeks here in a little interim period to look at some poetry. All of the poems that we're looking at in these 10 episodes come from a collection of selected poems of mine from 1989 to 2009. And we're looking at, most of these episodes we've been looking at about 3 poems, and that's what we're going to do today. And what I've been trying to do is pick out a poem and then kind of one that I want to do, and then look through the rest of the collection for a couple of others that kind of go with it and fit the same sort of theme, so we can get a kind of a thematic element in each episode. This episode, the theme I would suppose would be parenting, being a parent, but more specifically, raising children and balancing that with the tension of some of the disillusionment that occurs as we get older. You know, we have children, we have grandchildren, and we know that one day they will realize things that they don't know right now. And we trust, I suppose, that they'll come to those realizations in the right time and in the right way, and we hope that they will. They'll grapple with that, I think, as we grapple with our own experiences, sometimes very positive, sometimes kind of traumatic in lessons that we learned. And so when you're a parent, you know, and your child is there, and you think, okay, this is a teaching moment, then you grapple with that idea. Is this the time for me to really teach this new and difficult thing, or is this the time to let it be and let them be blissfully innocent for a while longer? And it's not that those aren't easy decisions, but there's both a beauty in that, in seeing the innocence of the world through the eyes of your child or your grandchild, and then a sadness in some ways for the loss of that in yourself, but also a sadness that. Sometimes that the world can't just be that lovely thing we think it is when we're very young. So these 3, that was a really long. That's a very convoluted theme. So hopefully you sorted through that, and we'll just go ahead and get right into the poems. We've got 3 poems. All of them do have to do with children and with experience, my own experiences at various points with my 2 young daughters. All of these are poems written when my daughters were very young, and so that's the context. This first poem is called Design. And it is not a long poem, but a longish poem. It's not a short poem, and it comes in about 3 parts. And so Design. 1. We have a secret place, my daughters and I, where an old creek has run empty. The sky above that hill pushes fast past the swaying tips of pines, but the birch, oak, and ironwoods have not yet leaves enough to dance. No dry winter, no drought emptied our creek. The water turned aside some years ago for other work, and my oldest stares at the smooth stones sunk into soil. When will the water come back? My youngest has hands delicate as birch twigs and burrows pebbles from the bank like a busy mole, carries one at a time to the mound of larger rock we are shaping into a ring for our campfire. She chooses a spot for each, and believing in some master design, believing I would know it, asks, should I put it here or here? There. That looks good right there. But that's really the question, isn't it? And I think of the waters working years and centuries into polished stones, forever setting and resetting each here in our creek bed to be abandoned. 2. I cannot tell how my knees bend, how my fingers inside these leather gloves swing on their hinges. I know only the digging and the occasional sun on my neck. I cannot read the seasons burned into the grain of this handle or tell what secrets, if any, the hills keep. But here, another shovelful for a moment visible, mixing with air, thrown toward the sun. 3. The deep soil claims each stone we leave unturned, swallowing her wayward children. Around us, the trees are smoldering with an inner fire, relaxing into the dirt that grew them, flaking open with each rain, skeletons all of ribs, marking the ground with bright stripes of greener grass. The air darkens as rain enters the ravine like a lost fawn, one step there, here, hesitant behind us, other side of the tree, there, again, over the rise, and suddenly, certain, almost purposeful, all around us, the leafy floor comes alive with movement. We flee our unfinished altar, rain drenching stones, wood, dirt, rivulets filling, refilling the creek bed. And back in the car, we decide tomorrow to build a bridge. So this was written in 1997. We had moved to Spearfish and we had bought some property outside of town, the property that's described here. And we were going to be building a house on the property. And there was, it was a gulch, what they call a gulch, and it had a place where it was clear that water, a creek, a stream had flowed through at some point. But, you know, in the hills, all of those streams, so many of them, the water had been put to work here or there. And so they had been kind of artificially diverted here and there. And so this little stream bed that was on our property probably had not ever been a stream for a very, very long time, and was only an occasional kind of drainage spot where if you got a really heavy rain or a lot of, in the spring, a whole lot of snow melting, it would fill up a little bit for a day or so. But it was not a stream or a creek in the proper sense. But that didn't make us any less excited about the fact that it was there. And so my daughters, probably, 8 and 4, maybe, were out there with me, and we set a task before us to collect stones to make a little fire ring, which was an important thing to us. We built a fire ring before we even built the house. So down there in our little gulch, our little valley beside the plot where our house was going to be, the girls and I picked our stones and we made our fire ring. And I don't know exactly how much they understood about what we were doing, but it was clear from the questions, my oldest daughter's questions about what happened to the river that was here, to the stream that went through here, because it was clear that there was one. And I didn't have the answer to that. And there was some sadness I could tell from her, because she would love to have a stream run through the backyard there. And so would I. And then my youngest daughter, busy picking stones and asking me very seriously, very importantly, should I put this rock here or should I put it over here? And what it made me think of was the fact that here my very, very young daughters looked to me assuming that I had the master plan, that I knew very specifically and very exactly the best place, the right place, the proper place to put each rock and which rocks ought to be selected and precisely why the river was not still here. And of course I was confronted with my own self-knowledge that I don't know anything. I'm making it up as I go along. As we all are, if we're, I think, honest with ourselves. But that doesn't make it any less wonderful, and it doesn't make it any less perfect to place the rock right here or right there. And I think at some level, and that's why the title of this became Design. This is a big question. I hear people say very flippantly when something happens, whether it's bad, horrible, or very good. Well, God has a plan. God has a plan for everything. Saying flippantly that any little bad thing that happens or any little wonderful good thing that happens, that was predetermined, pre-selected, set out from the beginning, part of the grand master plan, and just, it couldn't have happened any other way. And, aside from there being no reason to believe that, I find it very painful to live in that way because it has horrific implications. God has a plan for 6 million Jews to die. That was God's will. The creator of the universe intended for nearly 300,000 and growing Americans to die of COVID-19. And I think that view of the world, in a simplistic way, is comforting. But if you look more closely at it. It's horrific given the reality of our world. And so at the end of the poem, I'll get back to that. I don't want to just leave it there. At the end of the poem, we decide, the girls and I, because the rain is falling and the rain is gathering and the rain is filling up our creek bed, we decide, oh my goodness, tomorrow we got to build a bridge. You know what? We didn't need to know why there's no creek there anymore. We didn't need to know that. I couldn't tell them that. I couldn't give them all the reasons. I couldn't map it out for them. I couldn't tell them exactly the precisely best way to build a fire ring. But in the moment, as the rain is coming down and filling up the creek bed, we say, oh, wow, tomorrow let's build a bridge. So we've got a bridge to go over our creek. Forget the fact that the creek will be gone in another day or so. That's what you do. You say, this horrible thing happened. Or you say, this wonderful thing happened. Now, what shall we do next? What shall we do next? Because we know that we can do something beneficial at this point, or we can do something horrific at this point. We can add to the destruction of a horrible thing by reacting to it in horrible ways. Or we can redeem the horribleness of a horrific thing by allowing it to push us into determining to never do that again and to do something better to bring healing or solutions or whatever needs to happen. And I think that is the design. To be a loving and good person. And if you believe in a God who is a loving and good creator, doesn't it make sense that rather than planning out the specific and exact plan for everything to happen, including all the horrible things and the good things, that instead, what that loving, love-based creator would do would be to create a creation that can respond in loving ways. We can also respond in horrific ways, in unloving ways, in ways that are selfish and destructive, and we see that again and again and again. But we're capable of responding, of learning and responding in positive, good ways. That seems to be the best design. Building in the built-in capacity to learn and to grow and to do better. That seems to be, in my thinking, the master design. Not laying out all the events, both good and bad, and it's some kind of big magic puzzle that every time something happens, you go, oh, yep, that was part of the plan. No. Whatever happens, the plan is I'm going to respond in a positive, loving, beneficial, constructive way. That's the plan. So being confronted, though, with your daughters, who they're not asking about all that. They just want to know if they can have confidence in me leading this project, leading the project of building the fire ring, leading the project of talking about the trees and about the creeks and about the stuff. You know, they don't need to know, they don't at that point need to know the depth of my own ignorance. They just need to know that, first of all, their dad's a loving guy. He's going to respond positively. He's not going to tell them lies. He's not going to pull the wool over their eyes and try to fool them. He's going to be real with them, and he's going to be ready to make a positive plan for tomorrow. So, design. Our next poem is a much shorter poem. and it's called Taraxacum officinale, which is the scientific designation for dandelions. Taraxacum officinale. You're lying in the darkened bedroom, spent from an hour of choosing which of our bills to pay, which to let slide. But you'll be glad to know our girls are helping as they can, picking dandelions, collecting their tithes to us in 2 piles on the picnic table, one mine, one yours. I want to know what makes a thing dig in under 5 months of ice and at the first touch of spring push past packed earth, survive herbicide to spite dreams of solid green with gold summer again and again in each of its 100 heads. Our debt is to our children. We owe it to them to accept the gold they offer. So, I'm assuming that my wife and I are not the only ones who have experienced this. And this was relatively early. We don't now have to choose between which bills to pay and which to not pay. But there was a time, there have been multiple times, many times, when we were in that. And you know, if you've been there, you know what that's like, and you know what kind of tension it creates, and you know what that feels like to be spent, as my wife was at this time in our marriage, when we've traded this off once in a while, a couple of times, but she was doing all the bill keeping, and she was just spent after having sorted and tried to figure it and tried to make it all come out. And I had been watching the kids, the girls, and it was an early spring, and the dandelions were all coming up, and you know, I mean, I've written other poems, other things about dandelions. They're just lovely, and they're prolific, and they just pop out everywhere, and they're just bright and they're sunny, and for some reason people hate them. People want to get rid of them. People dislike the dandelions. But every kid, every child that I know, when they see the dandelions, they think they're magical. Whether they're seeing them in the flower form or in the seeding form, you know, the blowing on and making wishes and sending those seeds off flying into the air, or looking at the gold and making jewelry out of the dandelions, necklaces and crowns and things, and so our daughters, being perceptive as human children are, knew that things were stressful. And one of the things you do when things are stressful is you bring gifts, you bring presents. And what do kids have? Well, they've got their hands to pick flowers, and they've got the flowers that they're allowed to pick. And those are the dandelions. And so our daughters were picking dandelions and making piles on the picnic table outside. One for me and one for Cheryl. And I was struck by two things. One, I was struck by the tenacity of the dandelion. Something that is pushed down and fought off and despised and disdained, and still comes back with a vengeance. Won't give up. So there's encouragement number one. When you're struggling and you're thinking, how can we make ends meet? How can we do this? Look at the dandelion. The dandelion has everything against it, but it keeps coming back. And two, look at the gold. The gold that our children see. The things that our children value. The gifts that our children give, which, it was a gift of dandelions. But it was so much more than that. It was a gift of, here's a pile for dad and here's a pile for mom, because they're not feeling good today, because they're upset about something and we don't even know exactly what it is. But we know that when we do something good for them, it makes it better. And so on a day when you're so overwhelmed by your debt, you can look at the debt that you have that's not overwhelming, that's just encouraging, the debt that we have to our children, to accept the gold that they offer. Because that's what they need from us. They need us to care about the things that they offer. The dandelions, the good, kind words, the crawl up on the lap, the performance at school, the little thing that they made. And it's so easy to become overwhelmed with the adult debt that we forget the true thing that we really owe our children, and that is to recognize the value, the unmeasurable value that is embedded in them and their lives, and to communicate that. So, Taraxacum Officinale. And our last poem, and this one's a difficult one. So just fair warning. If for some reason you're sitting and listening to this podcast with your kids, why don't you listen to this next one on your own first, and then decide whether or not you want your kids to listen to it. So that's just fair warning. So this last one does once again bring in my oldest daughter, Megan. She's mentioned by name in here. This is called On Cherry Hill with My Martin Backpacking Guitar. And it comes in 4 parts. So, On Cherry Hill with My Martin Backpacking Guitar. 1. 3 years ago, Martin began making them. Cut down, sawn off, easy to carry anywhere. I know an executive, Chris at the music store told me, who takes his to the office. It's a big seller for men 30 to 45. Half mandolin, half banjo, mellow and light so you can feel it hum, pressed against your ribs. Start your whole insides to singing with one strum. 2. The first time I came out to Cherry Hill, a crack in the old stone bridge revealed yellowed photos from Penthouse and Playboy. Sent our 8-year-old stomachs to our mouths, threatened to pull us inside out, crotch first. Why Cherry Hill? I asked. And Kirk told me he'd heard all the high school girls had lost their cherries here. We were so young. We looked for them. 3. Coming out here alone with my guitar, I have developed a new religion, or maybe an old one. The long grass on the hill contains the spirits of all little boys who giggle here and later find the world mortared with more flesh than any centerfold. The spirits temporal graze as lost sheep until I return, an older David with my harp singing Absalom, Absalom, releasing them into the eternal. In this ritual of adult perspective, you must be grass level, facing heaven, and playing the chords to Gone to Carolina on my mind. 4. I went walking with my 5-year-old daughter, and our feet led us to Cherry Hill. She wanted to stand on the stone bridge I'd told her about, see herself in the still creek below. She ran here and there collecting bits of trash, old pop cans, oil jugs, asking, "Can we recycle this? And why do people want to trash this place?" I wanted to tell her, want is too strong a word. But all I said was, "Don't touch, it's dirty, someone else will get it." Of course, no one else would, but at least she never found any photos. Going home, she asked, "Why do they call it Cherry Hill? I don't see any cherry trees." And I had a thought that today was a good day for planting some. So, as you know, if you've listened to the podcast any length of time, I'm a musician, and I play guitar, and I had at one point, this was probably in 1993, 94. I had purchased a Martin backpacking guitar, which, if you know what they are, they're small. They're easy to carry along with you if you go hiking or backpacking. You don't have to carry a huge guitar with you, and so it's a good thing to take out if you're going to go out on the side of a hill somewhere and play a little bit of music. And so I got that. I realized as I was talking to Chris, apparently at the music store, that it was a midlife crisis kind of purchase. And it took me, because I was living in York, Nebraska at the time, Cherry Hill was a little place, just kind of, it wasn't outside of town, it was in town, but it was kind of left overgrown. It was a section where the railroad used to go through, and there was a stone bridge there, and people, we used to ride our bikes over there, and kids would play and stuff. And I think in recent years they fixed it up and turned it into a disc golf course or something. But back then it was kind of overgrown, and so I'd go out there and I'd take my Martin backpacking guitar and play Gone to Carolina in my mind, and whatever else came to mind, and reconnect with childhood, which reconnected me with the fairly early and fairly disturbing shift among myself and at least one other friend, actually a few friends, discovering pornographic pictures that have been hidden there in the bridge by apparently probably some of the older kids. And of course, this was at a time when those sorts of images weren't as prolific and as ubiquitous as they are now, given the internet. And so it was a real shock it was a real, what does this mean? What does this mean about women? What does this mean about me? What does this mean about the world? What does this mean about my parents? What does this mean about older kids? What does this mean? And we had no idea. We didn't, and we were at that point, at 8 years old, 10 years old, where you're trying to put things together, trying to sort pieces through and figure out what the heck is going on. So what do? Of course, you ask the older kids. And Kirk, my friend, had heard someone say, this is where all the high school girls lost their cherries. And we had no earthly idea what in the world that meant. And we were looking for cherries on the ground and trying to figure out what we were even looking for. We didn't know, and we're too embarrassed to ask, of course. But then, of course, you figure all that out. And something is lost. Something is lost. And I'm not mourning the loss of innocence, because I think innocence into full-fledged adulthood, innocence of that sort, naivety maybe, is a horrible, damaging and an awful thing, because it makes you vulnerable to a world that is often not safe, is often very destructive. That's why we protect our children. But it's still sad. It's still sad to lose that naivete. And then once again, I think I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, that time when we as parents come face to face with a decision. And this was not a hard decision at this point. My daughter was, 5 or so. Why do they call this place Cherry Hill? I don't see any cherry trees. And her response was just exactly what mine was when I was 8. Why do they call it Cherry Hill? There's no cherry trees out here. Why do they call it Cherry Hill? And in the poem, the decision at the end is, well, maybe today would be a good day to plant some. I don't know what kind of a response that is, but it's a positive response. It's a response to something that is flippantly dehumanizing of young women. It turns it into, it throws it away and says, maybe we should just have some cherry trees out here, and we should just forget that other thing. And you really realize that. I mean, I grew up being very much learning, because I thank my parents for this. I thank my mother and my father both, and others who were in my life, that I'm very much respecting women. But you realize how toxic the world can be, and not only to women, but to all human beings. And then as you grow further, and you come to know that there are different groups of people who have differing perspectives, differing cultures, differing colors, differing religions, differing all of these things. And you realize that there's all of these things that threaten to crunch them up for no other reason than that they are different. And that's the ugliness. That's the ugliness that we want to work against. And we want to plant trees instead, rather than going along perpetuating the ugliness, laughing about the ugliness, joking about the ugliness. What we want to do is plant some trees, do something productive, do something that bears good fruit. So there we have it. There we have it. 3 poems about a dad and a couple of daughters. Maybe that's the theme, a dad and daughters. Grappling with that cusp of learning something that is going to be at some level a disillusionment, a dissolving of an innocence, or maybe better, a naivete. And we all know that has to happen, but the timing, who knows what the timing should be? We trust our hearts, we trust the relationships, we trust ourselves in the moment, I suppose, to make the right decisions for ourselves and our children. And then we hopefully have the grace to forgive ourselves when we screw that up and make a decision as a parent that maybe later we're tempted to regret. But you got to have grace. You got to have grace for yourself in that. So there we go. Thank you for joining me for another Dancin Moon Songcast. You can find all my music and all my lyrics at scottsimpsonmusic.com. And of course, these 3 poems will be posted on the podcast page, which is at scottsimpsonmusic.podbean.com. You can find it there. And of course, you can get these podcasts on anywhere that you stream your podcasts, and you can get my music anywhere that you stream your music, Spotify or iTunes or Apple Music, Amazon. Ask Alexa; she'll play some for you. And I want to thank you. We're quickly moving on to where we're in the full-fledged in the holiday season, moving close to Christmas, and we're in a difficult year, a challenging year, 2020, as everyone said, a big dumpster fire of a year. And I know that this holiday season, whatever holidays you're celebrating, means showing love to family and friends, and you may have trouble doing that this year because you're trying to stay distanced. So I'm wishing you the best in this season, that you can find ways to show your love to those that you love in ways that allow them to stay safe and you to stay safe as well. I do have, and I'll be talking about this more, we do have a new album coming out really soon. It'll be available, releasing on the 15th of January, but it will be available for pre-order starting on the 13th of December, which is the day that I'm broadcasting or putting out this podcast. So if you're listening to my words, it's already available for a pre-order. And the title of that album is Keys to My Head. So if you don't think you have quite yet unlocked everything in my head, you can get that album and unlock a little bit more. So thank you so much for your patience with me. And this episode has been a bit of a heavy one. I tell you what, I get super heavy when I reflect on my children, because they mean so much to me, and especially now as I watch my oldest daughter, the one who was there on Cherry Hill with me, as I watch her raise her first son, my grandson, my little grandson named Fox. All of these things become so much more important to me. They were important to me then. Wow. Put it on steroids now. So it's important to be able to take these times to reflect at every stage in life. So, stay tuned and be well.